Bonjour et bienvenue à la 8e semaine du cours de français 102. Cette semaine, nous allons faire la section grammaire interactive du chapitre 8. Je vous montre ici sur le site de Blackboard les informations qui sont présentées. On va commencer par faire la section sur les verbes pronominaux. So pronominal verbs are the verbs that use se in front of it, like se lever, to get up. Reflexive or pronominal verbs. There is a video tutorial for those in Central over here. So go to the grammar tutorial tab and make sure that you watch the tutorial video, the chapter 8, 8.1 reflexive verbs. Unfortunately, there's only one grammar tutorial and they really should be 3. So I'm doing this video to replace the other parts that are missing. Voici donc la première section dans le chapitre 8, la section grammaire interactive. Je me lève à 7 heures. We're going to be talking about daily routine verbs, and a lot of those are pronominal verbs. So, when you think about pronominal verbs, you've already used a few, and you already know a few from the communication en direct section of this chapter, like se réveiller, to wake up, se lever, to get up, se coucher, to go to bed, and also s'appeler is to be called. So when you say je m'appelle Florence, or je m'appelle Claire, or je m'appelle Francis, those are pronominal verbs. So you can change a verb into a pronominal verb. It changes its meaning just by adding a pronoun in front of it. For example, Robert regarde un portrait. Robert is looking at a portrait. But Robert se regarde dans le miroir. He's looking at himself in a mirror. So the se makes it he's doing it to himself. That's why it's called reflexive verb. Here are 6 pronominal or reflexive verbs that have a meaning that you're doing it to yourself. So since you learned body parts and the articles that go with them, let's fill those out. Se brosser les dents, s'essuyer la bouche, se laver le visage, se maquiller les yeux, se peigner les cheveux et se raser les jambes, par exemple. And this is a little note. A lot of students have asked me, do French women really not shave? I guess there is a saying in the United States that French women don't shave. I didn't know that until I got to the United States, because I would say that most younger French women do shave, or a lot of people do wax their legs. They have a professional service. They go to a beauty salon and do that maybe once a month. So just a little fun note there, I guess. I was surprised that a lot of people asked me that question, so I thought I would include it here in this video. So here, you have to complete the table with s'habiller, and we're going to read together se laver, which is to wash oneself. So, je me lave, tu te laves, il se lave, nous nous lavons, vous vous lavez, il se lave. So literally, this is just I wash up. But in French it's I wash myself. So je me lave, I wash myself. Tu te laves, you wash yourself. Il se lave, he washes himself. Nous nous lavons, we wash ourselves. Vous vous lavez, you wash yourselves. And ils se lavent, they wash themselves. And in English, you don't need to add myself, yourself, themselves to make sense of the verb, but in French you do. This little note here with the highlighted part means that the pronoun always forms a block with the conjugated verb. So if you have a negation, you put the ne in front of the block and the pas after. So you have nous ne nous couchons pas tard. The nous and the couchons form a block and stay together, and you have ne pas that go around it. Elle ne se réveille jamais tôt. You have se and réveil that form a block that stay together, and you put your ne and your jamais or pas, second part to the negation, after the verb. some pronominal verbs have a meaning that is definitely not pronominal in English. It doesn't always make sense that it has a so in front of it in French for English speakers, but it has to be there in French in order for the verb to make sense. Like s'amuser is to have fun. Se dépêcher, se détendre, s'endormir, s'ennuyer, se promener, se sentir, et se trouver. Those do not have a meaning that is anywhere close to reciprocal or pronominal in English, but you need to make them pronominal in French in order for them to make sense. Another little note about how your pronoun will stick with the verb and where you put it. So, nous nous amusons bien is we're having fun. Nous allons nous amuser en vacances. This is in the future. We are going to have fun on vacation. So the nous, even though there is a conjugated verb here, allons, and an unconjugated verb afterwards, the nous always has to agree with the subject of the sentence. So nous allons nous amuser en vacances. You should not write nous allons s'amuser en vacances, but you have to make sure that the nous is conjugated in the first singular, first plural person. So nous allons nous amuser en vacances. Tu te couches tôt? Do you go to bed early? Then if you have an obligation, tu dois te coucher tôt ce soir? Must you go early tonight, or do you have to go to bed early tonight? You're still conjugating the te here, even though it's in between two verbs and before an unconjugated verb. There's an interesting note on the loi anti-tabac, so the anti-smoking laws. De nouvelles lois anti-tabac ont été mises en œuvre en France en 2006. D'abord dans les années 90, il a été interdit de fumer dans les bâtiments administratifs, les écoles, les entreprises. Depuis 2006, c'est aussi interdit dans les cafés, les restaurants et même les boîtes de nuit. Le gouvernement français espère ainsi diminuer le nombre de décès dus aux maladies causées par le tabagisme. Il a même adopté la journée mondiale sans tabac tous les ans le 31 mai. D'après une enquête commissionnée par le ministère de la Santé, 2 ans après l'application de la loi, son respect est quasi absolu. Même s'il y a toujours des personnes récalcitrantes, en général, les fumeurs ne fument pas dans les lieux publics où ils vont fumer dehors. Malheureusement, la consommation de cigarettes n'a pas encore diminué, alors le ministère organise des campagnes anti-tabac. Une de ces campagnes utilise plusieurs affichages avec le slogan « Ça vaut le coup d'essayer ». It's worth a try. I wanted to show you on the Blackboard site a couple more anti-smoking ads that the government came out with in the year 2006 that are still somewhat shown today. 1000 façons d'arrêter, un seul numéro, 3989. So there are 1,000 ways to quit, only one number. The no smoking quit line, 3989. And here below I wanted to show you what just a little accent can make for a difference. Le tabac tue on the left. This has to be written on every cigarette pocket or cigarette package sold in France. Le tabac tue. So tobacco kills. And then on the right, as a play on words, if you would, when the law passed, the cartoonists in the newspapers made this little cartoon here. Le tabac tué. So tobacco, the tobacco industry in a sense, has been killed. So tuer is the past participle. Just one little accent makes tobacco kills into the tobacco is killed. And the last ad I had for you today that I found that the government came out with later, a little bit later in 2006. Il ne sait pas encore parler, mais il tousse déjà très bien. So you have a picture of a baby. He does not know how to talk yet, but he coughs already very well. So because of breathing secondhand cigarette smoke. So this is hopefully going to persuade a lot of people between that and the prohibition from smoking in public places. It has made a lot of difference going to bars and restaurants in France and Belgium. They follow the same system. Has been very helpful. Je retourne ici à Central. C'est tout pour la première section. Je vais à la section 8.2. Qu'est-ce qui se passe? This is about asking questions. And then you go back in a section 8.3 to your pronominal verbs, but this time you're learning them in the passé composé. If I were you, I would do section 8.1 and then 8.3 and then go back over and do section 8.2 because it's not about the same topic. So I'm going to do the same right now. 8.3, tu t'es amusé ce soir? So you're going to be expressing past actions with the pronominal verbs in the passé composé. And my dog is moving right behind me, so this sentence comes just at the right time. Le bruit a réveillé mon chien. The noise woke up my dog. But you say il s'est réveillé à 8 heures. He woke up at 8 o'clock. So this is to show you, remember the verbs in passé composé usually use avoir as the auxiliary verb, and there are 17 verbs in French that use être. Those are the Dr. and Mrs. Van der Tramp verbs. I hope you remember. Now, all of those pronominal verbs, so reflexive verbs, use être to form the passé composé. And you see that some verbs change their meanings, whether they have they're used with avoir in the passé composé, or if they're reflexive verbs and then they're used with être. So le bruit a réveillé mon chien, this is used with avoir. And if you say he woke himself up or he woke up at 8, it's reflexive, then it has a different meaning and it's used with être. The past participle of pronominal verbs normally agrees with the subject of the sentence. So this is just like your passé composé verbs that are conjugated with être. If you don't remember that, make sure you go back to that section in that grammar tutorial in Central. So Marc s'est réveillé ce matin à 6h30. Marc woke up this morning at 6:30. Since Marc is just one man, réveillé is in a masculine singular form. Marie s'est bien amusée à la fête. Marie is one lady, so amusée has to be in the feminine singular form. Stéphanie et Jules se sont promenés. You have one woman and one man, so your past participle needs to be in the masculine plural form. Mes sœurs se sont trompées d'adresse. Mes sœurs is my two sisters, so two girls. Make sure your past participle is in the feminine plural form. Just like normal verbs in the passé composé that are conjugated with être, those 17 verbs. You follow the same rule here as for those 17 verbs for your pronominal verbs in the passé composé. Okay. We're going to add a little difficulty here, and if you don't remember it, I will not penalize you for it. But those pronominal verbs, when they are used in the passé composé, you need to agree the past participle. I just said it above. Like elle s'est lavée, she washed up or she washed herself up. Laver needs to be in a feminine singular because we're talking about elle, so she. But if you add an object behind the verb and you add what she washed, so she washed her face up, elle s'est lavée la figure. Because you have an object here, la figure, then you don't need to agree your past participle in laver. I know it's just one added little difficulty, so if you don't remember that little detail, it won't come up very often. It's just to let you know it's there. Here are a couple daily routine verbs and accident verbs here below. Se brûler la main, par exemple, to burn your hand. Se casser le bras, to break your arm. Se couper le doigt, oui, to cut your finger. Se fouler la cheville ou se fouler le poignet is to sprain an ankle or a wrist. Again, we had learned that the pronoun was forming a block with the verb, and that works in the present and in the passé composé. In the passé composé, your pronoun is going to form a block with the auxiliary être. So, in the negation, tu ne t'es pas promené, your te from the reflexive and est stay together and ne pas go around it. Elle ne s'est jamais ennuyée en classe, your se and est form a block and the ne and jamais go around se. Elle ne s'est jamais ennuyée en classe. She never got bored in class. That's it for the reflexive verbs. In the present is section 8.1, in the passé composé section 8.3. Now I'm moving over, backtracking and moving over to questions. You have learned how to form questions with est-ce que in French 101. Adding question words in front of est-ce que, like when you ask qu'est-ce que in chapter 3 and quel in chapter 6. Now we're going to add some more question forms. So when you were using qu'est-ce que before, you were asking to identify an object of a verb. For example here, qu'est-ce que tu regardes? What are you watching? Je regarde un vieux film. I'm watching an old movie. So je is your subject, regarde is your verb, et un vieux film is your direct object because that's what you are watching. In the second question, qu'est-ce que tu manges? What are you eating? Je mange du popcorn. Du popcorn is your direct object because you have your subject, je, and your verb, mange. Du popcorn is your direct object. When you're going to want to ask about the subject of the sentence rather than the object, you're going to say qu'est-ce qui. So qu'est-ce qui instead of qu'est-ce que in point 1 that you already knew. Qu'est-ce qui se passe? What's going on? Qu'est-ce qui se passe? Oh, rien d'intéressant. Nothing interesting is going on. So the implied part is going on. So your rien d'intéressant is the subject of an implied sentence, if you would. Qu'est-ce qui ne va pas? What's not going all right? What's going wrong? J'ai mal à la gorge. I have a sore throat. So, qu'est-ce qui ne va pas? J'ai mal à la gorge. Qu'est-ce qui est arrivé à Paul? Or you can just say, qu'est-ce qui est arrivé? Il est tombé de son vélo. He fell off his bike. So, qu'est-ce qui? When the answer is going to be the subject of the next sentence. When you're asking who, there are two forms. So if your answer is going to be the subject of the next sentence, you say qui. And if your answer is going to be the object of the sentence, you're going to say qui est-ce que. So qui est-ce que tu admires? Whom do you admire? J'admire mes parents. Admire my parents. So mes parents is the object of the answer. That's why you ask qui est-ce que. On the other hand, or the opposite, it's qui se lève très tôt chez toi? Who gets up very early at your house? The answer is ma mère se lève tôt. Ma mère is the subject of your answer, so you use qui in the question. Okay, a few more details. So when you have questions with qui or que, usually you have verbs that have prepositions for answers, or that use prepositions that are attached to prepositions. For example, sortir avec quelqu'un, to go out with somebody, ou parler de quelqu'un, to talk about somebody, ou parler de quelque chose, to talk about something. The prepositions are not usually put in the same place in French as in English. So here in French, avec qui est-ce que tu sors ce soir? Literally, with whom do you go out tonight? Whereas in English you say, who are you going out with? In English, the with is at the end of the sentence, But in French, you say with whom are you going out? Parler, same thing. De qui est-ce que vous parlez? Literally is about whom are you talking? But in English, you'd say who are you talking about? So in English, the about is at the end of the sentence, but in French is about whom are you talking? You put it in the front. So qui remains the same whether or not a preposition precedes it, but que becomes quoi. So if you have a preposition, your que is changed into quoi. À quoi est-ce que tu joues? Literally, at what are you playing? In English, you just say, what are you playing? Parce qu'en français, on dit jouer à quelque chose. De quoi est-ce que vous parlez? Literally, of what are you talking? In English, what are you talking about? So instead of de que and à que, you have to write de quoi and à quoi. When you have a preposition in front of the que, it becomes quoi. Here are pronominal verbs that require preposition. So those are two different things. The pronoun is in the front, is always se in the unconjugated form. And then your preposition is what comes at the end of the verb or after. So for example, s'entendre avec quelqu'un. Bien ou mal s'entendre avec quelqu'un. So your reflexive pronoun is your se, but your avec is your preposition, so with. Se fâcher contre quelqu'un. S'inquiéter de quelque chose. S'intéresser à quelque chose. Se moquer de quelque chose ou de quelqu'un. S'occuper de quelque chose. Se renseigner sur quelque chose. Se tromper de quelque chose. Se souvenir de quelque chose. Ou se spécialiser en quelque chose. Par exemple, je me spécialise en histoire, en architecture, en médecine, en sciences infirmières, and so on. This is all the grammar you have to learn for this chapter. There's a little note on Quebec here, so please read the note on Quebec and why on the license plate you see je me souviens. Je me souviens is a pronominal verb. Se souvenir is a pronominal verb. And I'd like you to watch a little video in Blackboard about the Quebec motto, Je me souviens, and why it ended up on the license plate, why it's an important motto for people who live in Quebec. Et cette semaine, vous avez aussi un forum de discussion. So I'm asking you to write 5 things you do in the morning. You can use the reflexive verbs that you see in the list. And you can add some of your own verbs if you do something different. But at least 5 things you do in the morning. With as many of the reflexive verbs as you can. Par exemple, le matin, je me réveille à 6h30. Je me lève et je m'habille tout de suite. Puis je mange mon petit déjeuner dans la cuisine. Un chocolat chaud et une tartine de Nutella en général. Ensuite, je me brosse les dents. Je me lave la figure et je me brosse les cheveux. Finalement, je me prépare à partir au travail vers 7h30. Voilà, c'est tout pour cette semaine. Passez une excellente semaine et à bientôt.